You are listening to Middle East Monitor Conversations, bringing you lively discussions with prominent voices from the region and beyond, as we delve deeper into issues shaping the Middle East and North Africa, from politics to culture and the arts.
Hello and welcome to a conversation with MEMO. My name is Nassim Ahmed and I will be your host today. We've got a very interesting show today about a new initiative called Palestine Podcast Academy. The project connects Palestinians across Gaza, occupied East Jerusalem, and throughout the West Bank for training in podcast production and extending various mentorship programs. I am joined by the project's founder, Maddox and Dalia Shurrab, a Gaza resident who has been involved with the project since its beginning. Welcome to you both, and thank you for joining MEMO Conversation.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, thank you. If I may, Dalia, start with you. You've accomplished. I was looking at your CV and the things you've done. You've accomplished a lot. At such a young age. Influencer 2016. Golden Woman Award for 2020, and various other things that you've managed to achieve. So how did you get involved with Palestine Podcast Academy, and how has it served you? And give us a bit of your own background and your own experience with producing videos and programs on the Palestinian issue.
Like at the beginning, I'm a physicist, so people can feel that it's confusion. They feel that they are confused because I have a background with science, and now I work with press and public relations and things like that. When I graduated from school, I wanted to be a great scientist to represent Palestine, because I knew that there is no space for Palestinians except if they work hard, showing their case through science. And after the university, I found the reality is far, far away from what I believed in and what I dreamed in. So I wanted to raise my voice and the other Palestinians' voices also. I started writing in virtual forums about Palestine, because when I have a discussion with someone from Egypt, or with someone who's foreigner who would never be here about Palestine. So at the beginning of the conversation, they will ask me, "Where are you from?" And I will say Palestine. They will reply, "Pakistan." So it's a different country. I have to explain more. They know more about Israel, while Israel is the occupation. And I wanted to really highlight this. So I started working with small initiatives and local and international organizations on helping Palestinian youth to find their way, to raise their voice, and also to generate income that provides them with a decent life. And during my work with Mercy Corps, I've met Eric, and he interviewed me to talk about the Palestinians, the Palestinian youth who face challenges in finding jobs, and how the program that I worked at, and I was responsible on social media on their, I managed their social media, and I also led their communications. Created a space for Palestinians to find jobs online, and since that we've become friends. He talked to me about the Palestine Podcast Academy, and I showed interest in supporting that because I wanted also to create my own show. Yeah, I wanted to be I wanted to make my dream as a Palestinian ambassador to the world come true. And he was like a great support, and like he brought a huge knowledge to me and to the other students of the Palestine Podcast Academy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really sounds like, Eric, you've managed to tap into something. There's real demand for authentic Palestinian voices to have a space where they can produce podcasts and be trained to produce podcasts, which is what this academy really is. And we will talk about more in detail about what the academy actually comprises of. But your story as well, Eric, is very, very interesting, quite fascinating. You were at one time a Christian Zionist wearing IDF T-shirts. How did you go from there to now being, a campaigner for Palestinian solidarity and being a founder of Palestine Podcast Academy?
That's a very good question, and I will do my best to provide as succinct an answer as I can, because it was very much a journey. It wasn't something that happened overnight. It happened by stages. So I was, and I'm dating myself here, but I believe I was around 11, 12 years old when the first George Bush administration was happening, and the first Gulf War.
1991.
Yeah, and I grew up in a very conservative, Republican voting Christian evangelical family in one of the most conservative parts of the West Coast of the United States. And while that war was taking place in my church, they took us aside and said, it is a responsibility to support Israel. Without qualification. And so just thinking that it was my Christian duty as a young person, as an adolescent, I never heard the word Palestinian or Palestine. I recall no reference to either of those identities or nation. And so I just accepted it unquestioningly. And then also just my fascination with the region stemmed strictly from my narrow interpretation and the interpretation that was given to me about the Bible. And to skip over a lot, that's kind of what activated me. To skip over a lot, as an extension of that, I thought, well, okay, like I need to support the contemporary state of Israel, and so hence the running around in T-shirts and all of that stuff, and what I thought was cool in my early and mid 20s. Up through university, I was also not a politically conscious person, really in any sense, including the domestic issues in my own country. I just wasn't very awake. So the simplest explanation as to how I became a Christian Zionist is really just pure ignorance, right? And just accepting what I had been told. It wasn't something that was discussed in my household. My parents never discussed Zionism. I wouldn't have even known what a Christian Zionist was when I was one. And I suspect that a lot don't. It's
the air you breathed. It's the air you breathed.
You took the words out of my mouth. It's like, it's just the water I was swimming in, the air that I breathed in the particular kind of church that I was going to, right? And I think that that's an important distinction to make too, is that not all Christian churches, obviously there's Palestinian Christians who don't agree with Zionism, first of all, but there's also many Christian churches in the US that are not Zionist and that are even anti-Zionist, right? But Christian evangelicals tend to, in my understanding, be more the source for that form of support. To the point where, if I recall correctly, roughly a year ago, the former Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, to the United States, gave a speech where he said, look, we need to be looking to American Christian evangelicals, Zionists, as our source of support, more than the American Jewish community, because American Christian evangelical Zionists have, there's more of them, they have more political influence, and cumulatively more money, and they're more reliable as a source of support because a lot of American Jews are starting to question the occupation, right? Yeah. So as far as where the cracks started to take place and where things started to change for me, after the September 11th attacks in the US, I graduated from college about 3 months before that took place. And I was, like many young American men, like kind of faced with this decision, like, what do you do, you know, to show your outrage? And I could have gone any of a number of directions, but I had thankfully just spent 4 years studying philosophy and at least learning the basics of critical thinking. And so I decided to pursue the route of curiosity. And almost exactly a year after those events, I found myself for the first time in a Muslim majority country in Egypt, alone, and studying Arabic. And I started to get a street level education, which has been an ongoing source of my education in geopolitics ever since. And I started to hear Arab Muslim narratives about what was really going on, not just with regards to Palestine, but the history, the modern history of the region, US support for Mubarak, etc. And I started to realize something that I want other Americans in particular to realize too, and that is, I thought, look, I come from a country with free press, and I have so much knowledge to share with everybody else here who doesn't have our freedoms, right? Yeah. And I mean, I came at it with just looking back on an embarrassing level of paternalism and arrogance in my initial travels. Even though I did go there as really as a function of my curiosity, I still carried with me this arrogance and this kind of like default colonialist and Orientalist mindset. And so what I started to realize when I encountered these facts was that having a free press doesn't necessarily mean that you have a press that has the courage to speak the truth. And this is a major problem in the US. Sure, we may arguably have a free press, in quotes, that's overwhelmingly owned by what I think 6 corporations that are motivated by profit more than they are necessarily reporting what's critical happening around the world. You know, as we see, like the hyper focus on certain events to the exclusion almost completely of what's happening in places like Yemen, and make a list of countries where we're not seeing enough coverage, including Palestine. So those were the first fissures. And then in graduate school, a few years later, in 2006, I met a Palestinian who is also my language partner to continue studying Arabic. And he said, look, like I studied in the US, conflict transformation. And he said, look, like you have to go do your research phase somewhere. How would you like to come and live in Palestine, in my camp, Dahisha refugee camp in Bethlehem? And he said, you've got a place to stay. You just need to figure out a way to get yourself there and pay for your food when you arrive. And that was my first time in Palestine.
Before you continue that story, Eric, and tell us, just pause for a bit and tell us where you got the idea to create the academy itself and what the academy does for Palestinians. I wanted to just quickly bring in Dalia and ask her, how much of a need, before you came across Palestine Podcast Academy, how much of a need did you feel there was amongst Palestinians to have an authentic Palestine Podcast Academy, which allowed creative spaces for Palestinian women like yourself and others to express their views? Because here in the West and elsewhere, everyone looks down onto Palestine through the lens of whatever media you have. You never really get to hear authentic Palestinian voices. Is that a concern that is widespread amongst Palestinians in Gaza and elsewhere? And how much of a desire is there to create something or create a space like Palestine Podcast Academy to allow you to express your, the reality you face and your daily lives? So speak about that a little bit of the the need to create a space for authentic Palestinian voices to come out? Unmute yourself.
Of course, before like 10 years or 15 years ago, there is no like a place for free press or free journalism at Palestine. There is a propaganda, an Israeli propaganda that she sells to the world. And like the big companies, unfortunately, they accept that image of, about Palestine, and the Arabic or let's say the Mediterranean or the Middle East press was weak as well, because they were like the picture about Palestine that showed at that time is what Israel needs, what the US needs, and what the governmental powerful parties that needs. So at that time, people only cares about what the Israelis are sharing, and what the press were covering. But after social media, and I believe like social media is a really big move for Palestinians, it offers them a space that they can express about themselves, about their ideas, about their daily life, sometimes in a bright way, sometimes in a dark way. And that allows also some of the external support to know more about the reality that exists in Palestine. But like in the last couple of years, the Zionist lobby all around the world is pressing or putting pressure on the social media company owners to make our voices lower and lower, like because they saw that we are gaining much support and much empathy. They wanted to return to the I call it the dark ages, when Palestinians were under the occupation. They face attacks every day. They face humility every day. They face like we lived under circumstances and unhumanitarian circumstances. So we wanted to show that we are humans like everybody else all over the world, and we want to show our case. It's our land that was stolen, and it's our people who faces the huge attack from the occupation, and we face also neglection from all over the governments all over the world. And it's really hard to find a space, a free space that we can really express the reality or sharing the what we are facing on this land. For example, I will tell you like a story of mine. When in 2011, I got engaged to a Palestinian from the West Bank, and you know that there is a separation between Gaza and the West Bank. There is a land ruled by the Israelis, the Israeli occupation, and they forbid us to go vice versa. And at that time, like I met this guy in Jordan. I wanted all what I want is a permit from the Israeli side to go to live with my fiance, and then I will never like talk about it. But I found rejection. I found like they rejected me several times for no reason, and after that because they when they want to find when they didn't find a reason, they will call it a security reason without a base, without a truth base. So I tried several times to contact Palestinian leaders and like to support me and to help me get that permit. But after all, I had to do a social media campaign through Facebook. And I didn't, even when I did that, I didn't get the permit. And we ended up separated, and like he continued his life and I continued my life. But this opened my eyes into like a new era. I saw with my bare eyes that the power of social media, and I saw how much people like were empathy, like they empathed with me, and they wanted me to get my simple right. After that, I wanted to do something, and then I engaged more with the international organizations that also support the Palestinians to raise their voices and to make their own path through this life, and also to break the barriers that Israelis put in front of us as a Palestinian.
So it sounds like you met Eric at perfect time. The timing was quite perfect in that sense. So going back to you, Eric, you were speaking about, you gave us a bit of your background, but I also know that you were producing, a pod series before that. So when did you realize that there was really there is a need and appetite to have a Palestine Podcast Academy? What was the timing? And also just give us a bit about the details and the structure of the program itself. What does Palestine Podcast Academy do? What kind of service it provides, education it provides, and the initial ideas behind it when you of course met Dalia.
Sure. And also just to briefly summarize the tail end of my conversion story. What ultimately pushed me over is that I saw the occupation myself. I lived in the Daesh camp and traveled all over the West Bank. That was 2007, 2008, where I was doing my graduate research in conflict transformation. And then in 2013, I wound up briefly in Gaza as well. And so now I am pro-BDS, support full right of return. And I want to say enthusiastically, I am anti-Zionist. I think that we need to make that word. I think some people, even who are anti-Zionist, they say it with a bit of reluctance because they're afraid of the consequences and the attacks that they might face saying that. I state that with the same form of moral clarity and confidence that I call myself an anti-racist. And I think that it's important that when we say that we are anti-Zionist, we say it with that same sense of clarity. And this has absolutely nothing to do with my absolute respect for the Jewish community. I've got no issues with Judaism, and we need to separate out and resist at all points attempts to conflate anti-Zionism, which is a morally bankrupt political project that entails colonialism and is an extension of white supremacy, from anti-Semitism, which is racism and is a form of bigotry and prejudice. So that's where I'm at on those issues right now, just to make it very clear what my political positions are. As far as my own podcast, I would like to also say that that's ongoing. So it's called Latitude Adjustment, which for people who are aware of the American expression, like attitude adjustment, for people who maybe need to change their way of thinking or behaving. So latitude, just referring to, look, let's change our orientation on the map and not just prioritize like the narratives of the colonialized, quote unquote, Western world. So it highlights underreported places, issues, and communities around the world through interviews with people working at the grassroots. And that's actually how Dalia and I met. She was a guest on the show, and also talked about life as a woman in Palestine and women's issues in Palestine. So people can catch that episode, which is an ongoing series at latitudeadjustmentpod.com. So, we got some street noise here in Mexico City, which is a common thing. So I apologize.
I should mention you are in Mexico City, yeah.
Yeah. So as far as the origins of the Podcast Academy, they are an extension of my own show in a sense. I started out just interviewing people from all over the place, and a number of Palestinians, of course. I think I probably covered that issue more than any other on the show, but we cover everything. And also refugees from a variety of different contexts, obviously Syrians, Afghans, and on and on. And the first iteration of this idea actually came after my second trip to the Greek island of Lesbos, which is a frontier, so to speak, for people trying to escape wars in Syria, Afghanistan, etc., and has been turned into essentially a hidden island penal colony. And I've made 3 trips to Lesbos, the first in 2015. And when I was there in 2020, just before COVID hit, so I would imagine right before you started the show, I was there to do on-the-ground field reporting for my own podcast, going into Moria camp, obviously before it burned down. When it was supposed to hold around 3,000 people, at the time I was there, it was crammed to about 22,000 people. So you can imagine what the public health conditions were like once COVID hit just a few weeks later, right? Non-existent. And after conducting interviews with people in that context and publishing them, probably within that year, this idea came to me that especially after Moria burned down, and I realized that people were locked away in yet another camp, but this one much more secure from the standpoint of the European Union and the Greek government. Very difficult for journalists to gain any kind of access under COVID. People are only allowed out of this new facility that continues to this day for when I was there in early 2021 for 4 hours a week. So we conducted the first podcast academy actually on the island of Lesbos, connecting to people, many of whom were locked inside this camp, and we had to do it over phones using Zoom, and with primarily Afghan refugees. And so from there, after we successfully completed that first iteration of the project, it was clear to me. I mean, I have a passion for Palestine and have for years. For a variety of reasons that we've already articulated, but in part because I have so much frustration about how the U.S. Provides unquestioned support for the oppression of other people and what is being done in the name of U.S. citizens. There is a particular moral responsibility for Americans to take an interest. So that's part of what informs this sense of urgency, and also the urgency of, well, more than 70 years of dispossession, more than half a century of military occupation, and unending war crimes every single day. So the idea was to, much like on Lesbos, to put the narrative back in the hands of the people and to say, look, it's one thing to have people, to provide a platform for other people, but it's a whole other thing to teach people how to create their own. And that's really what this is about. It's about two things. It's about helping people to first create their first podcast episode so people can go and they can listen. Our graduates created episodes as their graduating projects in both English and Arabic. You can hear Dalia's episode. It's episode 2. And so that's part of the purpose of the Academy, is to get people over that barrier of like needing the confidence to create, right? And also then providing them with 6 months of ongoing mentorship to make sure that they don't feel abandoned at the end of it, and that they have the support they need to go on to make their own shows independently. But I want to emphasize one thing that is kind of a hidden part of the Academy, and that is the process and how important that is as well, that and the intention behind it. There's a reason that we connect people to work in teams from Gaza, from Al-Quds, and from the West Bank, instead of just focusing on these places in isolation, right? We did not want to duplicate the apartheid structures that keep Palestinians separated by dealing with them in separation in our training. We wanted them to be connected and to create like one.
So just to clarify, what you're doing is you're producing teams of podcast producers from the various, areas in Palestine, Gaza, West Bank, so they can work as one and move beyond the barriers and the restrictions imposed by Israel.
In the Academy training, that is what we're doing. What they do at the end of the Academy is up to them. They may want to continue working in teams, or they may want to go on working as solo producers of their own show. That's up to them. But in the training itself, like as we're running the actual Academy, all of the people who are learning, they're producing their first episodes together. We're attending our Zoom sessions together. And the idea there is to create, at least in a virtual space and in a didactic context, one unified Palestine, as it should be, right? And also to build relationships between individuals and our institutional partners. I should point out, like, this isn't just us moving in as Open Roads Media. We're actually an incorporated nonprofit organization in the Netherlands. That's the umbrella organization, of which I'm the director. We are also working with local partners. So we worked with, for example, Birzeit University as well as one of our partners on the first 2 Palestine Podcast Academies that we've created. And so we want to create relationships between institutions in all of these different areas and individuals, because something that I also have heard from some of my Palestinian friends is just because we have Skype and Zoom and all of that doesn't mean we're randomly reaching out to our fellow Palestinians in these different areas, right? It would be like, I don't randomly reach out to someone in New York just because they share my nationality, right? So the training actually creates a platform for Palestinians to meet other Palestinians as well, right? Like, we're obviously not the only means for them to connect, but it's part of the intention behind our training and how it's organized, is to make sure that Palestinians meet other Palestinians whom they might not otherwise connect with, and get connected to institutions, and that those institutions also connect to each other. So hopefully I've covered.
Yeah, no, you have. Just before I go to Dalia, can you just break down some numbers for us? I mean, how many graduates, how many people have graduated from Palestine Podcast Academy? And also, how would people that want to enroll, how would they enroll at the Academy? What would be the process? So just quickly answer that before I turn to Dalia.
Sure. So far, we graduated 20 citizen journalists, I would call them at this point, and 18 women and 2 men. And I would also like to emphasize that everyone in a leadership role, all of our facilitators are Palestinian women, and that is deliberate. If there's time, we can go into the reasons for that. And is there anything else that I missed? Oh, how do people join? So right now we're raising funds on LaunchGood, which people who are listening may be familiar with, is a Muslim crowdfunding platform. We're raising funds to be able to continue offering this academy. And it's very important that it receives grassroots support, because so often supports that come from corporations or even foundations or governments come with strings attached. They will try to censor you before, during, or after the fact if you don't fit their version of the Palestinian narrative, right? So if things are funded from the grassroots, this gives us the freedom to provide 100% independent, uncensored, unfiltered media from Palestinians in Palestine. If people want to join, they can reach out to us in any of a number of ways on social media. If you go to our website, latitudeadjustmentpod.com, you can see all of our social media details. You can reach out to us on our Instagram account, which has the same name, Latitude Adjustment.
What I'll do when I upload this on our website, I'll put the link below. So if anyone wants to join your academy, they can.
Perfect.
So turn to Dalia. I mean, feel free, Dalia, to respond to any of the comments Eric made and the questions I asked Eric. But also, if you can, I just want to get your thoughts on, on the importance of having the Palestine Podcast Academy or spaces like that, because as you know, for the vast many numbers of years, most of the space has been dominated by either Western narrative, and even within the Palestinian context, there's been a narrative which is kind of a status quo narrative, which reinforces the Oslo two-state solution paradigm. Nothing really, very few comes out from beyond that, outside that narrative and framework. So for you, someone resides in Gaza and the Palestinian, how strong do you feel to have a alternative narrative, a space which allows you to move beyond the orthodox two-state paradigm, Oslo narrative, and allow Palestinians to, voice something authentic, which they themselves want to create and express to the rest of the world?
Actually, it's a dream. I want to make it true. And it's a belief I want everybody to believe in. It's a thing that very important, not only for me, but also for all the Palestinians all over the world. We, as a Palestinian, I was born in Saudi Arabia, and I felt how to be a Palestinian refugee, because I also a refugee. My grandfather flee from Jaffa to Gaza Strip because he was unsafe and he lost his house and his money and everything. And I studied at the Norway schools for the whole of my life. And then but before that, I want also to tell something about something Eric mentioned, joining Palestinians together. I was amazed and shocked that most of the Palestinians from the West Bank and Jerusalem, they know almost nothing about Gazans, except that Gaza is under attack and under the war. They didn't know about the beautiful nature of Gaza, for example, because they never came to Gaza. And also the Gazans as well. People from Gaza, they never saw a mountain. So they have a dream to see a mountain someday, or to climb a mountain someday, because it's it's a beach, and there is no the nature of Gaza is really flat, so they don't see these things. They don't experience these things. And back to your question, it's very important for Palestinians to find a place to express, not only to express, also to find supporters, to gain the what we can call it. I'm so enthusiastic. I want to speak for I want to see it to talk so to speak so many things in the same time, but I can't find the words to express my feelings. You can feel my energy. If we have this platform, we will show the world not not only our narrative, but also we will show them our successes. We will show them our energy. We will make them feel how smart, how talented, how creative are the Palestinians who live under the occupation, and unfortunately, how the occupation make their dreams and they make their energy construct their energy and they.
Undermine their progress.
Restrict our energy, restrict our dreams, restrict everything. Like they are blocking us from the world. But when we have this platform, this will allow us to be open to the world. The only open, like for Gazans, because I lived in Gaza for over 30 years. I lived under the blockade and I didn't have the connection to the world except for the internet. So the internet is the only open gate. And when we have this platform, we will be able to talk, to tell our story. To show the scenes of the different scenes of the Palestinians, not only when it's under the war, not only when it's under attack, because we have much more than that. We have life, we love life, and we want to show that we love life, because the narrative about Palestinians that they love death, they love when I visited the US for the first time, one of the first Americans that I met, they were like they felt strange because I smile, because I talk about the future, because I love roses and love traveling and things, like normal things like other people. And he asked me one question. He said, like, Palestinians from Gaza, I believe that you love to drink blood. And it was really strange. Why should we drink blood? It's not like it's not right.
I think Eric will know best the mindset after decades of propaganda and being misinformed. That's the kind of attitude people tend to have. But that's really good to know. We are coming to the end of our show, and I wanted to ask one more question to Eric about the future of the project. I know it's only been just over a year and a bit, and you've had 20 graduates, as dozens who are still studying, working within Palestine Podcast Academy. How do you see this developing? Because as we know, there's been a lot of crackdown and suppression of spaces for Palestinians to voice their concerns and their plight, closing down of Palestinian news agencies. Just yesterday, Israel announced the appointment of a new envoy to crack down what they call delegitimization of Israel on on social media, to crack down on BDS campaigns, to crack down on news agencies and sites which promote the idea that Israel is an apartheid state. So I think as we're seeing more and more crackdown on orthodox traditional spaces, how do you see the importance of something like Palestine Podcast in the future to actually make up for the fact that, on one side, voices are being shut down, when to create more and more spaces for authentic Palestinian voices to appear and inform the world about, their plight and the reality of Israel's occupation?
So there's a lot there, right? There's a lot that I want to say as well. So first of all, there's nothing to me that's more compelling than if you want to convince people and also to, more than convince, just see the lived reality, or in this case, hear the lived reality of Palestinians, than to listen to Palestinians themselves, right? When appropriate, I will speak about my opinions on this topic all day long, but we need to be centering Palestinian voices. This is their struggle. And for all the reasons that you've mentioned, we need to be redoubling our efforts in order to create those spaces, because there's so much pressure to try and restrict and eliminate them, including pressure placed inside the US to try and make support for BDS nearly impossible, or in certain cases, if I understand correctly, what's being done, making it illegal, right? So that's crazy. That goes against the fundamental notion of just a U.S. freedoms, like it's our freedom of expression and speech, so the pressures are immense, and the need for this to be funded from the grassroots is critical, because that allows for a measure of freedom that you don't necessarily get when strings come attached, when you reach out to larger entities. I'm not saying that there aren't good foundations out there funding worthwhile projects, okay? I want to give credit where it's due, but the source of support needs to come from the grassroots. I want to take 2 seconds just to actually clarify like how people can find out about us and how to support us. So our campaign is Palestine Podcast Academy on LaunchGood. All right. You can also find that by going to our website, latitudeadjustmentpod.com. And if you want to hear Dalia's episode, if you want to hear all the episodes created by the people who've already graduated from the Academy, also just subscribe and follow Latitude Adjustment Podcast. It's available on all of the platforms. So Spotify, Apple Podcasts, pretty much any app on Android phones. So subscribe to latitudeadjustmentpod.com, and you can already hear what people have done with the limited amount of tools that we've had. Now imagine what we could do if we had substantial support. As far as, I want to make sure that I answer the thrust of all of your questions. So your question was about the future and pressure.
Yeah. So gaining momentum, how do you see Palestine Podcast Academy in the future in pushing back against the efforts to crack down on Palestinian voices?
Okay. So as is true of any major movement for decolonization and meaningful social change in human rights, the power always starts with the people. Governments might come in later and sign up and pass legislation and take credit, but really the initial power and momentum is generated by the people. And that can be shown in a number of ways, right? Our podcast academy is one of them, and supporting it is one way for people to express that support and manifest that sort of grassroots pushback against all of these efforts to try and suppress Palestinian voices in spaces that would platform them. Going forward, we want to grow it. This isn't something that we want to do one time or 2 times or 5 times. We want this to be ongoing indefinitely and led by Palestinians. Really, that's the focus. I am the only non-Palestinian involved in the implementation of this project. And at a certain point in the future, I even want to step back from my role as the director and have it be led completely by Palestinians. So I could go into even how we want to grow this to be a global thing, right? Where we have Palestinians training non-Palestinians how to make podcasts. But the critical need right now is for people to express, those who stand in solidarity with Palestine. Yes, Palestinians need basic human needs supported, such as clinics and hospitals, medical aid, and education and housing. All of these things are critical. And I don't want to say that what we're doing should be prioritized over that. But one thing that is important to remember is that if we are always responding in moments only of crisis, then we're missing an opportunity to break a cycle. right? And that's, I think, where the Palestine Podcast Academy fits in. We need to educate people so that the crisis cycle ends, so that people have the information that they need in order to make informed decisions about what is being done in their name as Americans, as European citizens, as citizens of countries that are providing unquestioned support to Israel. This is an information war as well. And we need to make sure that Palestinians have the tools they need to express their story, and that people outside Palestine have access to Palestinian voices so they can make informed decisions as voters and petition their governments and express their outrage at what's being done in their name. So going forward, there needs to be support that doesn't just have us responding in moments of crisis only. And you know how the news cycle works so often. I mean, there are wonderful organizations such as yours, right, that keep Palestinian at the forefront. But mainstream media, in the English media in the US, in the UK, et cetera, we all know that really the only time we're hearing about Palestine is in the context of violence. And that just reinforces stigmatization and this narrative that all the things that Dalia just said, like that Palestinians have a rich culture, that they have natural beauty that defines their surroundings. I've lived in these places, right? And that Palestinians are people, and their lives aren't just, while they're living under occupation and they are oppressed, these things are important to remember, but they're people. And their stories need to be heard to give the full picture of their humanity. And who better to do that than Palestinians? It's not, I'm happy to share what I know, but really we need to be creating spaces for them to be speaking.
Exactly. We have run out of time. I have to say, it's been wonderful talking to you both. For our viewers, check out Palestine Podcast Academy. The link will be on our page when we put this podcast out. I want to thank both Eric, Maddox, and Dalia Shurrab for giving us their time and joining us for conversation. And for you at home for tuning in, thank you very much, and see you again for our next MEMO conversation. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Ramadan Kareem. Bye.
This was Middle East Monitor Conversations, brought to you by the Middle East Monitor in London.